course, the first priority has to be, I believe, always in focus above synergy. So you have to start with focus. Be good at what you need to do. That's your first role. And then when you're good at it, you can start to look for the synergies. And I think NATO has to do more when it comes to the focus part, because we have to invest more. We have to get our weapons production up, both in the US as well as in Europe. But at the same time, we cannot let go of the fact that we need this cooperation with the Indo-Pacific partners. There's widespread support for that. In NATO, France was always a bit apprehensive in terms, should we really have a China policy as NATO? But I think increasingly also in the Élysée in Paris, there is the realization that we need to work together also in China.
So you mentioned the perhaps growing global alliances between, say, China and Russia and Iran and North Korea and a few others. How did you at NATO interpret the meeting where Chairman Xi and all of those others met together in China a few months ago?
Yeah, first of all, this is not a military parade. It is a military ballet. Because I think these military people we saw on television cannot hold a gun. They are ballet dancers, and they trained 2 years to present that fantastic, what they call a parade. And I'm always happy when I see European and American soldiers parading. That is not what we are particularly good at. We're good at fighting. And that's what we should be good at. And that's how democracy should function. So I'm not too impressed by this ballet, but it underscores the fact that they are hooking up. And there was also Narendra Modi was there from India. And of course, he is not lost, so we still also try to maintain strong relations with India. But he was also there, but particularly, it's true, we have seen, of course, the Belarusians, but Putin, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un using this train because he doesn't dare to fly, I think, into Shanghai and then in Beijing. So it was significant. I think at the same time, it is also to make us wonder how strong they are, etc. I'm not too impressed on that thing. But when it comes to China, generally, we have to be aware that they will have 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030. They have now more Navy ships sailing than the US. They have a shipbuilding industry, which the US has not at the moment. In the Second World War, you had these Liberty ships. You produced one every day, or I think, or one every week at the end of the war, but you would not be able to do that today. So one of the things I'm always discussing with the Pentagon is get your shipbuilding industry going again. So let's be aware of what the Chinese are doing, and let's not be naive or underestimate them, but let's not get to be too afraid by these ballets, because that's a question of taste, whether you like it or not.
Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of the Department of Social Sciences, to the cadets in the International Relations course, and our other distinguished guests, thank you for being here today. And welcome to this tremendous opportunity to have a conversation with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Sir, we're honored to have you here today. I'd like to thank Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Bakey, the Director of the International Affairs Program, Major Aaron Lemons, the SS-307 Course Director, and Ms. Christine Getzler-Vaughn, our Foreign Service Officer in Residence, for their help making this event possible. Thank you. Since last October, Secretary General Rutte has served as the 14th Secretary General of NATO, the highest representative of the North Atlantic Alliance and one of the world's most influential diplomatic positions. In this role, he leads an organization comprising 32 member nations committed to collective defense and transatlantic security. Prior to his appointment as NATO Secretary General, His Excellency Mr. Rutte distinguished himself as the longest-serving Prime Minister in Dutch history, holding office for nearly 14 years, from 2010 to 2024. As Prime Minister, Secretary General Rutte was known for his pragmatic leadership style and his ability to build coalitions across political divides. His experience in European affairs, NATO relations, and international diplomacy made him a natural choice to lead the alliance during these critical times for global security. Please join me in extending a warm West Point welcome to NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte.
Can I have that speech for my family? That's very good. Thank you. General Reeves, cadets, it's an honor for me to join you here today. West Point has always been a defender of democracy, of freedom and liberty. High above the Hudson, the fortifications at West Point protected, as you know, the newborn United States of America. And for more than 2 centuries, West Point has made the leaders that make history. You wear the same grey cloth as cadets MacArthur, Patton and Eisenhower. I personally carry a deep and abiding respect for US military might. We Dutch recognize the indispensable role your predecessors played in winning World War II. My family and my nation thrive thanks to that fighting spirit. West Point is an expression of the ideals that build America: duty, honor, country. The leaders from this academy always put service over self. From the beaches of Normandy to the fall of the Iron Curtain to defending our way of life today. And it should come as no surprise that West Point graduates have always been at the heart of NATO. General Eisenhower was our first Supreme Allied Commander Europe. More than half of those who followed him as SACEUR attended West Point. And some of you will go on to serve alongside your European brothers and sisters under a NATO flag. The motto of this year's West Point class was "Together we thrive." And together we thrive in NATO. 32 nations standing together to protect each other. And with great American leadership, we are making NATO even stronger. At the NATO summit in The Hague, we began a new chapter for NATO. Allies will spend 5% of their GDP on core defense and security-related investments. This is a defining moment for NATO. It puts America's allies on a trajectory to equalize their defense spending with the United States. And that way will make all of us more secure. We will massively increase defense production, so our militaries, men and women like you, across the alliance, have what they need to keep us safe. Allies must be able to rapidly produce, sustain and replenish military equipment. From basic munitions to complex weapon systems, industrial might and military might go hand in hand. And we will become stronger because the world is more dangerous. We are in an age of confrontation. This is confrontation we did not seek. It was contrived in capitals working to undermine us: Moscow, Beijing, Pyongyang and Tehran. Russia has brought war back to Europe and has teamed up with China, North Korea and Iran to expand their capabilities and their ability to exert influence. But history shows that North America and Europe working together is a winning combination. Our adversaries know this. Our enduring commitment to NATO's Article 5, that an attack on one is an attack on all, sends a powerful message. Any aggressor must know that we can and will hit back harder. America's military power packs a punch, and there is strength in numbers. NATO's 32 allies represent half of the world's economic and military might. As my friend and your boss, President Trump, has said, America first does not mean America alone. And peace through strength is what NATO was made for. A strong NATO means America has less to worry about in the world. A secure Europe, a secure Atlantic and a secure Arctic are priorities for NATO and essential for America's long-term security. We all benefit from protection our transatlantic alliance provides. But America's military has carried too much of the burden for too long. So, therefore, we are rebalancing our security for the better, with Europe and Canada stepping up. Everyone doing their fair share will make the transatlantic bond even stronger. American leadership is vital for transatlantic security and crucial to bring peace back to Europe. I know President Trump's personal commitment to end the fighting in Ukraine. Too many innocent civilians and too many soldiers have died. Ukraine's security impacts all of our security. And NATO is committed to support Ukraine. In July, President Trump and I announced a new NATO initiative to deliver urgent military support to Ukraine. Already this has channeled $2 billion of military equipment from the US to Ukraine, paid for by allies. We will continue to support Ukraine so it has what it needs to defend today and to deter any future Russian aggression. The foundation of Ukraine's future security will be Ukraine's own armed forces, first of all. The United States and allies are working on security guarantees to ensure that once there is peace, that peace will be lasting. We should not be naive about President Putin. He has shown no real sign he wants to end the war. We see Russia pound Ukraine day after day, night after night. I've met Vladimir Putin many times, and I'm certain that increasing the pressure is the only way to get him to the negotiating table. One lesson of the war in Ukraine is that even with advances in modern warfare, we still need well-trained, well-motivated, and well-equipped soldiers. The individual still makes a decisive difference on the battlefield. As General Patton said, the soldier is the army, and no army is better than its soldiers. If called on, you are the generation we will depend on to lead, to fight, and to win. Cadets, you represent the best of the United States. You answered your country's call, and you will defend your nation and the values we all hold so dear. I pay tribute to you and to those who went before you. When I was Prime Minister of the Netherlands, I went to the White House with a delegation to present an American flag that flew on a landing craft on D-Day. It was a moving moment, a reminder of the shared sacrifice of friends and allies, and that a strong America with strong allies is unbeatable. And we honor those American heroes who set Europe free. From the 82nd and 101st Airborne to the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. And I see those heroes in you today. You are the bright promise of a new generation. Honor their service with your own, and ensure your deeds provide the breath of freedom. Cadets, count on each other, count on your allies, and thrive together. Thank you so much. I go there?
Thank you, sir, for sharing those timely and thoughtful opening remarks with us. I'll invite you to please take a seat on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Brigadier General Shane Reeves, the 15th Dean of the Academic Board.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Please, sir. All right, sir, we get to the fun part now. We're going to ask some questions. I did notice you have a Marine that works for you.
Yes.
And then when he walked in, the entire auditorium applauded, but that was not for him. I just want to make that clear.
Hi, Nick. You know that?
He thought so. I saw it on him. So, sir, if you would humor me, I'd like to just give a little bit more detail about your background for our cadets here. And and say how much we appreciate you being here with us today. It's really an honor.
It's an honor to be here.
So, Mr. Rutte is, as you know, the Secretary General of NATO. And so you began your career in the private sector, if I understand correctly, working in human resources in the multinational company Unilever. And for all of you out there who don't know exactly what Unilever is, that's the company that makes your Axe body spray, right? Your Dove shampoos, your Parasol laundry detergent, and I think most important,
peanut butter.
I was going with Magnum ice cream, actually.
Magnum ice cream.
Magnum ice cream. That's where I was going.
Peanut butter is my favorite.
Peanut butter, yes, sir. So you began your government service in 2002?
Yeah.
And you haven't stopped serving since then. As Colonel Demarest pointed out, you became the Prime Minister in 2010 of the Netherlands, and you held that position for 14 years, which is an incredible time period to serve.
Something a bit too long in my country.
Yeah, maybe, all right. As the Dean of the Academic Board, which means I'm the Chief Academic Officer at West Point, I truly appreciate your passion for learning. And I've heard you've served as a part-time high school teacher of history also. Is that true, sir?
Yes. On Friday mornings.
Yeah. So, I have to ask you this question. Sure. Yeah. I got the, That's the history department up there,
exactly.
Sir. Yeah.
You always can see them. They're a bit disorganized, but they're fine.
Hence why they're up there, because they came in late, right? So I have to ask you, sir, what's harder? Is it harder managing Parliament in the Netherlands? Is it harder managing NATO as a Secretary General? Or is it harder managing the attention of high school students studying history?
Oh, high school students studying history is very difficult.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you are able, on your good days, to have a good story and to really engage them in the history, they love it.
Yeah.
But probably you also experience that over here, that it's not always easy.
No, sir.
And you have to be on the top of your game.
Sir, they have no problem maintaining the interest of the cadets in the classroom.
You're decent. You're too kind. But it's not always easy. It's great to be in national politics. I loved doing it. I did it a bit too long maybe, but still I loved it till the last day. And it is a great honor now to serve in NATO. And not always easy, because as you said, you have 32 countries. The US on its own is more than half of NATO.
Yes, sir.
So the other 31 are the other half. And of course, they all have the different views. It is one man, one vote, one woman, one vote. So each country has, in principle, the same amount of power. But obviously, they follow the US lead because you are so dominant within the alliance.
So one thing I also find interesting, and I'm going to get into some specific questions, but I also understand you're a musician. Are you like playing the piano?
Yes.
But
please don't get one out, because
I don't have a piano.
Practice,
I don't have a piano up here anywhere, sir. But
better not.
It is an interesting point that you've been in some extremely high-profile, very busy, high-stress jobs for a very long period of time, and I found it comforting to see that you had an interest in something outside of that work. And so, why do you enjoy playing music, and how does that help you?
Yeah, for me, I think you have to be the whole person. I never believed in leaving your personality at home when you go into the office. And we have had for many years, particularly in big business, this idea that it was professional to be professional. And professional was that you would never talk about what bothers you in private life, what your interests are, etc. And I believe if you want to be successful, you have to bring the whole person to the office. And to the job. And I hope you, as leaders, will also bring that out in the teams you are going to lead in the future, that you have that interest. Because in the end, it makes the whole team stronger. Right. And when then somebody is coping with issues or has or maybe some successes he wants to share or she wants to celebrate, then it's easier when you know a little bit more about each other's background.
Yes, sir. Well, so we have an academic year theme every year, and this year's Projecting Lethality, addressing the multidimensional challenges in the Indo-Pacific. Yeah. And that hopefully will frame you'll frame a little bit of our conversation, not completely, as I understand where NATO resides, but it is something that we are thinking about very, very much. And so I would just like to ask you this, sir, with that academic year theme in mind, how is NATO adapting to support that strategic focus, the Indo-Pacific? And what role do you see as the alliance playing in stability in one of the world's most dynamic theaters, which is the Indo-Pacific?
More and more. Since a couple of years, NATO has I think for 5 or 10 years now, has a strong cooperation with what we call the Indo-Pacific Force. So that's Japan, South Republic of Korea, Australia, New Zealand. By the way, Japan and Australia are farther away than Japan and The Hague. So in that sense, of course, the Indo-Pacific is quite a broad term. But still, there is some wholeness to that, to see this as the Indo-Pacific. The Trump administration, President Trump himself, is very much in favor of NATO playing a role there. Not in extending Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all, but by working together on how can we produce more weaponry, how can we learn in terms of innovation. I was yesterday having a meeting here with the Japanese foreign minister, who, in New York at the UN, and we were talking about all these developments. And of course, they are very worried. The US is, of course, very much concentrating also on the Indo-Pacific and what might happen or not happen with Taiwan. And then it becomes really interesting that over the last 12 to 18 months, what I have sensed is that there is an increasing awareness, both on the European side of NATO and the American side of NATO, that if one day China would choose so to attack Taiwan, if that would happen, that the chances, of course, are very big that Xi Jinping, the communist leader of China, would first place a call to his junior partner, Vladimirovich Putin, in Moscow, and ask him to keep us busy in Europe. And therefore, the idea that you have the Indo-Pacific and you have the Euro-Atlantic, and they are totally separate. No, they are connected. We see it also with Ukraine. It is North Korea, China, and also, of course, Iran, but when it comes to the Indo-Pacific, North Korea and China, supporting the war effort. So these theaters are more and more interconnected, and you cannot look at them as if they are separate. It is China which is emerging now as the second non-NATO country in the High North. Of course, not geographically, but we have 7 countries there in NATO, and the 8th one is Russia in the High North, but now there's a 9th, and that's China. Again, not geographically, but militarily. They're active there. They're using the opening sea lanes, etc. So in that sense, these two theaters are more and more interconnected.
So how does NATO then coordinate with global partners while maintaining the cohesiveness of the original alliance?
Yeah, so of course the first priority has to be, I believe, always in focus above synergy. So you have to start with focus. Be good at what you need to do, that's your first role. And then when you're good at it, you can start to look for the synergies. And I think NATO has to do more when it comes to the focus part, because we have to invest more. We have to get our weapons production up, both in the US as well as in Europe. But at the same time, we cannot let go of the fact that we need this cooperation with the Indo-Pacific partners. There's widespread support for that. In NATO, France was always a bit apprehensive in terms, should we really have a China policy as NATO? But I think increasingly also in the Élysée in Paris, there is the realization that we need to work together also in China.
So you mentioned the perhaps increasing growing global alliances between, say, China and Russia and Iran and North Korea and a few others. How did you at NATO interpret the meeting where Chairman Xi and all of those others met together in China a few months ago?
Yeah, first of all, this is not a military parade. It is a military ballet. Because I think these military people we saw on television cannot hold a gun. They are ballet dancers, and they train 2 years to present that fantastic, what they call a parade. And I'm always happy when I see European and American soldiers parading. That is not what we are particularly good at. We're good at fighting. And that's what we should be good at. And that's how democracy should function. So I'm not too impressed by this ballet. But it underscores the fact that they are hooking up. And there was also Narendra Modi was there from India. And of course, he is not lost, so we still also try to maintain strong relations with India. But he was also there, but particularly, it's true, we have seen, of course, the Belarusians, but Putin, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un using this train because he doesn't dare to fly, I think, into Shanghai and then in Beijing. So it was significant. I think at the same time, it is also to make us wonder how strong they are, etc. I'm not too impressed on that thing. But when it comes to China, generally, we have to be aware that they will have 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030. They have now more Navy ships sailing than the US. They have a shipbuilding industry, which the US has not at the moment. In the Second World War, you had these Liberty ships. You produced one every day, or I think, or one every week at the end of the war, but you would not be able to do that today. So one of the things I'm always discussing with the Pentagon is get your shipbuilding industry going again. So let's be aware of what the Chinese are doing, and let's not be naive or underestimate them. But let's not get to be too afraid by these ballets, because that's a question of taste, whether you like it or not.
Sir, you mentioned in your prepared remarks, perhaps it's an unfortunate fact, but that state-on-state conflict has returned to Europe with the ongoing war in Ukraine. And as we've watched this, we've watched a slow creep. 2007, there's some cyber attacks in Estonia. 2008, you see an incursion by the Russians. 2012, you see the occupation of Crimea. And then February 2022, we see this broad-based attack on the Ukrainians. And as we watch this play out, it seems that it is increasing in intensity. From last track that I understand, there's somewhere between 1.5 and 1.75 million casualties in entirety. Obviously, thousands of vehicles have been destroyed, and we're now starting to see incursions into Poland and other places. How has NATO shifted from perhaps that counterterrorism mission that was required after September 11th, 2001, to more large-scale military operations against this blatant aggression?
Yeah, but here, clearly, you're right. We moved just the tides. And when I entered politics in 2002, NATO was active outside NATO territory, with Iraq and with Afghanistan, and we still have a NATO mission in Iraq helping to train and develop the Iraqi security and defense forces, so that's very useful. We have in total 900 people still busy. We have in Kosovo still a KFOR, which is a NATO mission to help there, to stabilize the Western Balkans, so that's still there. But I would say that 95% of our focus is now back on defending NATO territory, the homeland. Sure. The US, Canada, and Europe, and making sure that the Arctic and the Atlantic and Europe are safe and secure. And this all has to do, of course, with Russia. Since, I think, 2011, 2012, we've seen a change. Maybe it was somewhat before, but I think it was really tangible from 2011, 2012. Then we had Sochi, the Winter Olympics in 2014, and only a couple of weeks later, he invaded Crimea, which is part of Ukraine. I mean, yeah, you can always discuss whether this was in the past, yes or no, but it's part of Russia, of Ukraine. It is legitimate Ukraine, and he invaded it. And I think our reaction has been a bit so-so. We had the Minsk agreement, and then he tried again in 2022. But hey, now we stepped up collectively. President Trump coming into office, really breaking the deadlock with Putin, trying to get him to the negotiating table. So far, he did not come, other than in one-on-one with Trump, but not with Zelensky there. But I really commend President Trump for trying and working on that. But then when you look day to day, what are the Russians capable of? It's not overly impressive. They lost 1 million people, or seriously wounded / died on the battlefield in Ukraine. 1 million Russians. Only to gather a few extra square miles of Ukraine. And at the moment, the Ukrainian defense lines are holding. The Ukrainians are staunch. When it all started, I mean, they were close to Kiev. They had to retreat back to Belarus and then to Russia. And now it's completely concentrated on the Donbass. So I'm not overwhelmed by Russia's impact on Ukraine, but at the same time, if you have a guy in the Kremlin willing to sacrifice 1 million people, can you imagine the numbers? Just to get those few square kilometers / square miles? Well, we cannot be naive. We have to defend ourselves. And he might also try something against NATO. And that's why we have to ramp up, first of all, Ukraine, make sure that they can stay in the fight, but also NATO as a whole. And that is why President Trump was right, saying, hey guys, Europe, you have got to step up. Not only because we are done with the fact that we spend much more on defense than the Europeans. Now we equalize. But first of all, because you have to be able to fight off the Russians if they attack. And you cannot at the moment.
Yes, sir. Sir, this is obviously an audience of future officers and some in the back that are currently serving. And one of the things we discuss oftentimes at West Point is our job is to prepare them to be successful in the complexity and ambiguity and uncertainty that is the global space. So what would be some advice you would give them as they prepare to enter into a career of military service on specifically how to prepare for that complexity, and maybe more specifically how to prepare for multi-domain operations, and really how to interact with coalition partners.
Well, what I'm always impressed with when it comes to American officers and senior officers and 2, 3, and 4-star generals is your capacity to be, yes, first of all, excellent military leaders, but also diplomats. For example, take Alexis Krinkovich. He is not from you. He is a fighter pilot. We won't hold it against him, but he is now the Supreme Allied Commander. But of course, his predecessor, we met him last night. He is now in New York. Chris Cavoli, he stepped away from that role in July. He is an exceptional leader. And what I'm always impressed, and I think that's because you have these institutions like West Point, is that you guys are able to fight wars, but also understand the complexities of the democracies and diplomacy. And when you are a Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, if the Russians would attack, basically the French President and the British Prime Minister and the Chancellor of Germany will give their office keys to a US general, and he or she will then lead Europe during the war. That's how the system is organized. It is a US general at that moment leading the European continent. And you are prepared to take those roles, be it in Europe or elsewhere. I hope what you do, and I know you do, so I'm not going to advise you because I know this is all part of the curriculum and how you train and prepare. But the more scholastic you can be, work on your profession, read, talk, discuss, develop your own leadership style. I asked when I was at this impressive mass lunch, wow, what a logistics operation that is, as I said. Putin should see this. He will never attack us. I mean, there's only one example of what you guys are up to. But I was sitting at the table and I asked the guy next to me, I said, hey, what is your philosophy about leadership? And is it just that you get taught what you need to do as a leader? I said, no, what we do is we read, we look into great examples from the past. And of course, you have some of the best examples, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks. But then you have to develop your own views, your own style, what is close to you, what works for you. And it will be different from person to person. In the end, it is all about effectiveness. And what I always also try to advise my young students when I see them, read. Read about history, read about leadership. Even if the person you're reading about irritates the hell out of you, you can still learn something. There's that famous scene in Invictus where the South African president asked the captain of the Springbok rugby team, what is your philosophy on leadership? And I think that's the core question. If you can answer that core question, what is your philosophy on leadership? When you get away from this institution, with everything these people will give you and you give each other, you're really the best.
So I noticed you just mentioned how impressed you are with Army 2, 3, and 4-star generals. Did you intentionally leave out 1-star generals?
Sorry, my mistake.
It kind of hurt.
I am very much impressed by the 1-star generals because they do the actual work.
Sir, it's too late. It's too late, I feel it.
I'm so sorry.
Sir,
I was checking, but he was still awake. Yeah.
Sir, NATO's first Secretary General famously described the alliance's purpose as keep the Soviets out, keep the Americans in, and keep the Germans down. More than 75 years later, things have changed quite a bit. NATO has tripled in size, and its members have a more diverse set of threats and interests. How would you describe NATO's purpose and key challenges going forward, these coming decades?
Keeping us safe against any adversary. We have a unique way of life, which is the democracy, the fact that we can debate, that we can profoundly disagree with each other and still be friends. That's the core values we all hold so dear. That's the Western way of life in the US, in Canada, in Europe. And that's what binds us together. That's why we are unbeatable, because we disagree and therefore we are wiser. We doubt and therefore we can lead better. That distinguishes us from the autocracies and the dictatorships. So we have to defend that way of life. And to defend that way of life, you have to work together. Because, as I said, we have Putin willing to sacrifice 1 million people. We have Xi Jinping, who has some visions of grandeur about China. And we have this crazy guy in Pyongyang, who is really totally ripe for a mental health institution. But still, he's president, or whatever he is. Supreme leader, I think they call it in North Korea. So we have to defend ourselves against these people. And That's what we are here to do as NATO. And of course, the first is Russia at the moment. But let's not be naive about China. We see the threat from China, and we see also what Iran is doing. And Iran, North Korea, and China helping Russia, supporting Russia in the war effort, they get a lot in return for this. North Korea gets the latest missile technologies from the Russians. Iran gets a lot of money for the drone technology, and they use that to steer chaos in the Middle East. And of course, China gains a lot because through the dual-use goods and the sanctions circumvention, they are able to get access to Russia, to the Russian market, to the Russian oil production, etc. So they really work together very well. We have to stand prepared and defend ourselves.
Along those lines, sir, again in your prepared remarks, and it really is a fundamental and seismic shift, how at the NATO summit last summer, or this summer, the NATO allies all agreed to raise their GDP spending on defense to 5%. That is a very big commitment and a big change. And the first question, sir, is what drove that willingness by the allies to do that? And number two, what are the political challenges in your mind going forward to make that happen?
Well, what drove it was basically two things. One is that we, under my predecessor, Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General before me, a first-class Norwegian politician, former Prime Minister of Norway, under his leadership, we started the NATO defense planning process, which is a 4-year cycle leading to assessing and agreeing on what we call in NATO jargon the capability targets. So when the moment comes that the Supreme Allied Commander would press the button of Article 5, who will do what, where and how and when, etc. And basically, to get from where we are to where we need to be, we assessed you need to spend on core defense 3.4, 3.5, 3.6%, ballpark 3.5%. Plus, we came to the conclusion that when it comes to societal preparedness, building the defense industrial base, fighting hybrid wars, we had to do more. And military mobility, that a bridge can not only hold a car, but also a tank. And particularly in some European countries like, and I won't mention Germany, but I could have mentioned Germany, this is an issue. But also other European countries. So we have to work on that. And this is in the 1.5% defense-related spending. So that's one reason why we do this, because it is necessary. I'm not sure if you guys would not have re-elected President Trump in November, that we would have gotten there. I'm pretty sure we would not. Probably we would have said, yeah, we should spend 3.5%, but a bit difficult, and we have our social costs and pension systems and healthcare, etc. I mean, it helped a lot, to be honest, that we had President Trump coming to The Hague. And it focused the mind of many people. So I have no vote here, but I was happy that he came and that he has that forceful influence. We had 8 countries not yet on 2%, beginning of this year. And I remember that I visited one of them. I won't mention the name, it was Spain. And I was there in Madrid. And I said, hey, Pedro, you have to spend 2%. Oh, impossible. Will not happen. See, a glass of wine, fantastic dinner. But nothing happening. And then President Trump was re-elected in April. He called me and said, well, we're going to do 2%. This is the old target from the Welsh Pledge of 2014. So all these 8 countries, also Italy and Slovenia and Belgium, Canada, they all have committed now this year for 2%, and we collectively committed to the 3.5 leading into 5% in 2035. It's amazing. Again, rooted in a thorough process, this capability targeting process, coming from the defense planning process, but also, I think, because the biggest ally clearly said, I'm totally committed to NATO, but I would not any longer accept Europeans not paying the same as we are paying. And the good thing about the 3.5% is it delivers the capability targets, but it also equalizes our spending in Europe with what the US is spending.
So is there ever, I'm sure there is tension, but how do you manage the tension between those states that have very different sized economies, very different sized capabilities within the broader alliance?
Yeah, it's not always easy, but of course, one of the things I learned, and that is my lesson in leadership, that when you point a finger at somebody, 3 fingers point at yourself, and that it's better to do listening than talking. So you always try to listen to all these political leaders. And for example, and Jeffrey is sitting here, Jeffrey is Chief of Staff of NATO, and we had to deal with Spain because Spain said, a week before the summit, we are not going to do the 5%. I said, but hey, you are committing to the capability targets. Yes, I am. I know there were, of course, national political reasons for Spain not to commit. We want an opt-out. Impossible. NATO has no opt-outs. It's unanimity, all 32 together. So in the end, we were able to solve that problem, but it meant a lot of listening. Me listening and Jeffrey typing to the chief of staff of the Spanish prime minister. But in the end, after 55 hours of negotiations on Sunday before the summit, we were able to get it done, and then Spain was able to basically support the conclusions of the NATO summit. So this is an example that you always have to work with national leaders. They all have their political issues, circumstances, elections coming up. And it is a democratic alliance that makes it so strong. I was in Latvia. Latvia is a country, of course, in the Baltics. It has one of the 4 land forces, 15 nations in NATO involved in Latvia. I spoke with the Canadian commander. I said, 50 nations, how do you keep that together? He said, well, we are stronger because we are with 15 nations than if they were all Canadians. He said, because we have to work together, listen, and then the patchwork is stronger because it is the patchwork.
Sir, but since 1949, NATO's grown from 12 members to 32 nation states, which makes the decision-making more complicated. How has NATO been able to maintain flexibility and agility to address things rapidly? For example, drone incursions into Poland, with what would be considered such a large number of states?
It's absolutely true that with 32 and you need unanimity, it can sometimes be difficult. And I think what I try to do in my head is always distinguish between those issues which are important but not urgent. And then you have other issues, and they are most of all military issues where it is urgent and important. And when it is urgent and important, you cannot spend too much time to get to an agreement. Again, Jens Stoltenberg, my predecessor, has been able to come up with a system where the Supreme Allied Commander has more authorities to, in those situations, come up with initiatives from the military side without always needing a 32 approval by all ambassadors in Brussels. So that helps. So, for example, when these air incursions took place, the 19 to 24 drones flying into Polish airspace, we are still assessing. They are Russian, but we are assessing whether it was intentional or not. We don't know yet. But of course, this was considerable, and this was on top of many other incidents. He launched in 36 hours Eastern Sentry. Eastern Sentry brings together everything we do in terms of air policing along all the 8 eastern flank countries. And basically, we want to go from air policing to air defense, including taking the lessons from Ukraine on how to deal with drone incursions. Because here a Dutch F-35 took down a drone, or a couple of drones, using missiles which cost you $500,000 to $1 million. And of course that's not sustainable. And the Ukrainians do this with counter-drone technology, which basically in many cases is drone interceptors costing not more than the original drone itself. So we have to learn from that. In the next couple of weeks we will rapidly start to roll out plans to get that going. And it was good that it happened because it woke up everybody that we have an issue here. But here it was, to your point, it was the highest commander in Europe, military commander, who was able to bring this together, get it done, without first going through the 32. And the ambassadors accept that because they know it is crucial that Putin sees that we react.
So you mentioned a few questions ago about when it comes to China and Russia. So for the United States, the primary focus is on China as the pacing threat, and our European allies are facing a more proximate Russian threat. But you made an interesting point how those threats are integrated. And one of the things I keep thinking about is the historic relationship between China and Russia. We oftentimes think, without nuance, saying, oh, they're completely in alignment. But you mentioned that Russia is the junior partner, and that has not always been the case. No. It also hasn't always been the case that there haven't been tensions between the Chinese and the Russians. And even there have been some people who have said that Russia is simply a petro-vassal state to the Chinese. So how close is that alliance actually based on those historic tensions that have always been between those two nation states?
Well, our assessment is it is a marriage of convenience. with a junior and a senior partner, junior partner clearly being the Russians. Of course, much bigger than China, but only 140 million people compared to China over 1 billion. Oh, by the way, shrinking the population in China, rapidly shrinking, but still much bigger, much more bigger than Russia. And of course, China has a diversified economy and Russia has not. Russia indeed is a petrol-based economy, which is now creating considerable issues for Putin because the Ukrainians are successful in hitting with drones some of the key Russian oil refineries, and that's now having a big impact on the Russian economy. You see these queues now at the gasoline station. If it would happen in the US, you would have a revolution. If you cannot fill up your cars, I think 76 would happen again. But in Russia so far, they've been able to cope with this.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you. In my house, if the hot water goes off for 8 hours, it's a revolution.
Exactly.
So it's game over.
Exactly. It's impossible. We are so used to having these,
that's right.
to having that. So there is a junior and a senior partner there. They work together on this. And we have to be conscious of the fact that also the Chinese, if they want to make a pass on Taiwan, time is running out. Because the population is shrinking and there might become a point of no return where it's almost impossible for them to mount that challenge. So I'm not predicting it will happen. I'm not predicting that Russia will attack NATO. But we have to be conscious of the fact that in a couple of years militarily they could, and that China might have a reason to do it with Taiwan, and that they will work together.
Now, sir, some have argued that NATO's recent enlargement and maybe military buildup could be interpreted by Russia as threatening, potentially fueling some of this uncertainty. How do you balance deterrence without generating escalation?
Well, by constantly saying, yes, we are a lethal organization, because when we are needed, we have to be lethal, but lethal in a sense that it is a defensive organization. So we are there to defend ourselves, and we will never start a war. Why would we? I mean, we are democracies. There's nobody in NATO who wants to capture a square mile of another country. It's not necessary. We will not. And the Russians, of course, know this. It's silly of them to think that we will ever mount a challenge to Russia. But we have to make sure that when they do, that we stand ready. And with Ukraine, of course, the issue is that not only what they do in Ukraine is against all our values, that you cannot, in the 21st century, colonize another country. This is totally crazy. We have moved beyond that phase. But also, because if they would be successful in Ukraine, it would embolden Russia, it would be much stronger, it would get access to a huge defense industrial base, gain another 13 million people. So for many reasons, that would also make Russia much stronger. So there is also a direct NATO interest for Russia not to be successful in Ukraine. That's one of the reasons why we are supporting the Ukrainians in that fight. But in the end, I think we should not be overly excited by what the Russians are able to do now with Ukraine. But again, if you have a leader who is willing to sacrifice 1 million people, you better be ready.
Yes, sir. I misstated earlier. I said Russia initially occupied Crimea in 2012. I meant 2014. Thank you for not correcting me, sir.
No, of course. But I heard that mistake.
I knew you did.
And the historians heard it.
I can see it on your face, yes, sir. But do you think there's potential?
I already made the mistake about the star. So
just say it. Do you think there's how currently NATO's forward land forces, which have been really forward since about 2014, will be a permanent feature, or is there some potential you could see where there would be a return to a less forward deployed NATO?
I think what we now do, the multi-layered approach. First of all, of course, a country like Latvia has its own armed forces, but it is a small country with 3 million people. So in the end, those armed forces will, in the end, have a limited size. That's unavoidable. But that's the first layer. Then as a second layer, to have the forward land force there, which in Lithuania will now grow into a number of 4,000 or 5,000. And in Latvia is about 1,200 to 1,500. I think that is there to stay, at least for the foreseeable future. And then, of course, there is the air policing. The fact that we need to make sure that the skies are protected. And that's what I just mentioned, that our Supreme Commander is trying to morph that from an air policing mission into an air defense approach, which, of course, will integrate everything we are doing there. I think because I do not see the Russian threat coming to a level where we could stop this in the near future. It's there for the long haul, I'm afraid, that threat. I would not predict that we can end this soon.
So, sir, please prepare. I have one question left, and those of you who want questions, please come to the microphones. The last question I have for you, sir, is what is Putin's endgame with Ukraine?
Endgame is Ukraine. I'm afraid that he wants it all, but I think he knows that he can't. So probably at a certain moment, as every conflict, it will end. Not every conflict ends with negotiation. I mean, the Second World War, luckily, we just won. Yes, and the Cold War, by the way, we won, thanks to Ronald Reagan and Maggie Thatcher. But I think in the Ukraine case, it's most likely it will end through negotiations. But then Zelensky needs to know that his country going forward after a peace deal or a long-term ceasefire is protected. If it is not NATO membership, which is not likely because the US is against it, and Hungary and Slovakia and the Germans, so it will not be NATO membership now. Maybe in the future, far future, but not now. At least we have to make sure that he has his own armed forces as a first layer, and then what we have now called the security guarantees by Western allies to make sure going forward that Putin will not try again. So probably most likely at one stage, one day, a negotiated outcome.
Okay, yes, sir. General Eisenhower is the first SACEUR West Point graduate class in 1915. And
Eisenhower, can you imagine?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Not a small name. Eh?
And so many of the cadets, of course, but the officers have had a chance to serve and work with our NATO allies, and it's such an integral part of who we are as a U.S. Army and as a country, and so we're very thankful. Matter of fact, I brought my Serge Lazarev Prize Award, right? This is such one of my key and most cherished awards I've received from SHAPE in Belgium, and I think so many of us would say the same thing, that we have these, and it's this relationship and this partnership is of immense importance to all of us, and we're very thankful for your leadership in helping it continue to flourish, sir. So thank you. Please give a round of applause.
Thank you. Really, I appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your candid insights with us today. We certainly appreciate the significance of your time, and I'd like to invite our cadets forward to present you with a token of our appreciation on behalf of the United States Military Academy.
Sir, please.
Wow.
They're going to give you an award this one.
What's happening? Oh, gee.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, on behalf of the Corps Cadets, the staff and faculty of the United States Military Academy, we would like to say thank you for sharing your thoughts and insights on the role of NATO, transatlantic cooperation, and collective defense against current threats. Your words have inspired us to think critically about our own roles as future leaders of multinational coalitions. As a token of our appreciation, we would like to present you with this cadet saber.
Wow.
Thank you, sir.
I'm really honored. Gee. Thank you so much. Thank you, it's very special. Can I, both, yes. Can I, at least, so next time you buy me beer if you don't have it. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you, it's a real honor. Maybe you know how to, yeah. Let's see how we get it in the plane tonight. It will be interesting. I get arrested, okay. No, it was a present from West Point. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the departure of the official party.
Sorry.